Okay, we're cooking, so we're going to keep cooking.
Okay.
Most people, if you ask them what a Quaker is, or you ask them what they think a Quaker is, or they will quickly revert to Anabaptism style practices, button versus hooks. They will revert to Amish. They will revert to all kinds of service level ideation about dress and community and culture, but they'll fail to ask you about your beliefs. Speaking theologically, even though you aren't a theological people, they won't ask you what you believe is within the context of eschatology or anything spiritual or anything about the history of the Bible or anything how you derive your beliefs about George Fox. It never seems to enter their mind that you have your own set of beliefs and your own set of practices, and they don't seem to not necessarily not want to know, but they don't think to ask. Why is that? Why, when you say, hey, have you heard of the Quakers? The guy goes, oh yeah, the people that dress like the Amish, kind of like the Amish, aren't they? Why is that?
Well, it's when you're asked who are Quakers, it's kind of people have an idea in their head who we are, and it's largely, I believe it's largely due to the Quaker Oats guy.
Okay.
Because that's the first thing when you hear Quaker, that image comes to your head.
Yeah.
Because it's around us all the time.
Okay.
That being said, is the reason the Quaker Oats guy is called Quaker is because of the beliefs that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And not that Quaker Oats was a Quaker company, it's just that idea of who the Quakers represented was what they wanted to represent in their company. So that's kind of where most people get that initial thought process.
Okay.
And they always say, well, you're like the Amish because the Quaker Oats guy is in plain dress and simple dress and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So automatically they assume that it's that Quakers are like the Amish because that's what they see on the Quaker Oats container.
Okay.
So, but there's a lot more to it than just that, because obviously we do use technology because we're on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
We use vehicles. We have cars. I drive a car. I work outside of the church, and it's we aren't Amish. We have our own belief systems, but
right.
We are similar.
Mm-hmm.
And that similarity is what most people identify with, but it isn't who we are.
Right.
So
would you say that what they're trying to do is latch on to the Quaker sensibility that in your economic practices that you're reliable, that you're well versed in economics, that you practice them in a way that is something like ethical, not quite, and not. I don't mean in the Jewish sense, because in the Jewish sense, people have viewed them as being good with money or adept at financial matters, but it's sort of conspiratorial, sort of mysterious. The Quakers are very open, it seems to me, or in others, that about how they manage their money, and it's not a mystery. They just practice good money management. So,
right.
In the Quaker Oats guy, is that brand trying to kind of grasp onto that and use that as a brand, and use Quakers and the friendships as a brand?
Yeah. In a lot of ways, yes. The Quaker Oats company has latched on to something part of our belief system. There's Quakers are broad group of people.
Okay.
But there are a few things that we do agree on, no matter what brand of Quaker you are.
Mm-hmm.
So there's simplicity is something that's important to us.
Okay.
Peace is something that's important. Integrity is something important. Our community is important.
Right.
And there's others. So, and what the Quaker brand for oats is doing is they're latching onto that integrity and simplicity aspect of our beliefs, and saying that we're Quaker Oats, we have this integrity. What we present to you is honest. It's honest. It's good oats, and that's good for them. It's good for us as well, because it shows that what we believe transcends just our own community. It reaches out to other types of people. So
yeah,
and that's where why we get associated with people like the Amish as well, is because we are simple.
right.
We do want our yeses to be yes, our noses to be no's. We want our speech to be plain and simple.
Mm-hmm.
We don't like things to be overly indulged, because we want it to be just straightforward, and we try to live our lives that way.
Right.
So,
Right.
and the aspect of simplicity, we want, our belief is that we are all called by God.
Okay.
And if we have too many entanglements, whether financial or in the community or in our family, and we're not able to just respond to that call, then we may not be able to be obedient to the calling that we're given. So we encourage people to live simple, so that we can respond quickly.
Right. But you can't just live simple, as in, make a determination one day. Okay, now I'm going to live simple. It's a process, or you tell me how that would work, how to transition from what you would consider complicated into what you would consider most akin to simplicity. Because I know that probably you would agree that even the most devout Quaker hasn't achieved complete simplicity.
No, I mean,
ideal simplicity, but I mean, just explain to me how the road there.
The road to simplicity. I mean, yeah, we all have different ideas as to what simple is, and for some of us, it would seem pretty complex. The biggest way to do that is to just the best way that I can see is, look at what you are living like, and see what's what's holding you back from being what you want to be.
Right.
And let those things go. Work on getting rid of like financial debt and that sort of thing, so that you're free to just move forward and to live freely.
Right.
So, or live within your means.
Right.
And it's just a process of evaluating your life, examining your life, and moving forward, coming up with your own plan and journey, and walking that way through the rest of your life.
Okay.
So it's going to take a while, yes.
Right.
I have student loan debts. I have to pay for those student loan debts before I can be totally free.
Yeah.
But we do have to work through that process, and hopefully the community is encouraging you to do that. So
Yeah. So the road to simplicity is the complex road.
it
So
really
in
is.
order to be
Yes.
simple, one must first be complex in their machinations about how to become simple. So, simplicity is a complex thing to achieve.
It is complex. Anything worth having is difficult.
Right.
It takes sacrifice. It's a struggle.
Right.
But it is worth doing. So if you don't do it, then you're going to be pushed by everything else. Somebody else has control of where your life is going, and you're not free to live for God, or your idea of who God is, or live for yourself or your family. So it's complex because it's part of relationships, but we have to be intentional in how we
Right.
live our lives so that we are free to live fully.
Sure. And one of the deeper questions here stems from one of my theories, and I can't say that it's my theory because it's eclectic and it's partly from Jordan Peterson, partly from Ben Shapiro, but it seems to that a lot of scholars that the degree to which Americans commit themselves to a religion is proportionate to either A, the degree of dogmatism that their religion adheres to, or B, the way that religion emphasizes aesthetics or rituals. So we have for dogmatism we have Wesleyan holiness. Their story does not change. I mean, if you ask a Southern Baptist or even a dyed-in-the-wool Nazarene, okay, what are the tenets of the Christian faith? How do we become Christian? How do we stay Christian? How do we live Christian? You can get pretty reliable answers from just about anyone you ask. I mean, they have a literal interpretation. They cling to that, and that's very important to them. That does not change, and even in the slightest bit. And there is, according to some scholars, there is some social utility in that. And that if we wake up every day and our core beliefs are pliable and they're open-ended and they're subject to change. Sort of like signing a loan contract with the bank that was kind of arbitrary. You woke up one day and your APR is 8%, and the next day it's 16%, and it has to do with the price of gold, and and it's just not manageable. So in that situation, the propensity, it seems to some, that will be to walk away from it, to say that, okay, this is changing too much. I can't get a grasp on what this is. And the reason that dogmatism in its current form exists is that so that when we wake up, we have a solid grasp of what we believe, and we can be reasonably assured that tomorrow we will believe the same, and so on and so forth. That way, this has created institutions like the Wesleyan holiness tradition that are so prevalent and so attractive to people for reasons that, to me, were mysterious when I was young, but I'm beginning to understand a little bit, is that they can go there and they can know that nothing has changed as far as the core ideology. That I can go here and I'm not going to get a different story. I'm not going to get a different version. I'm not going to get someone's spin. I'm going to get exactly what I've always been taught and always believed, and that provides me with stability. So I can take that and I can latch onto it. I can practice it, and I can be absolutely certain of that. And they're very, 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 very insistent on that. So, and from what you said in the past, not the Quakers are wishy-washy or what have you, but you said that that you are a non-theological people. So, tell me what that means, and tell me what level of dogmatics, if any, the Friends Church is comfortable in promoting or even latching onto.
Yeah, that's a really deep question because our history is fairly non-theological. Our core belief is that we are to live what we say we believe. So that goes back to that simplicity and integrity.
Sure.
If I say that that I believe this, I'm going to live it out in every aspect of my life.
Sure.
And that there isn't a separation between secular and sacred. All of my life is the same. And that's really where a lot of Quakers begin. Now, there's different branches of Quakerism. I come from an evangelical Friends background, so yeah, we have a little more theology than some, and that's okay. But I can still enjoy a relationship with other brands of friends because I can understand that it's a conversation, not necessarily a dictation.
Okay.
So
Now, what about ritualistic practices and aesthetics? I've noticed in Quaker churches, the iconography and different things. It's not that much different from Wesleyan holiness. But in the Catholic Church, you have these this brand of opulence, these cathedrals that are built to be beautiful and to be attractive and to be awe-inspiring, and you have the parishes and the priests and these people that will dress likewise. And that's to appear lofty in some estimations. Not saying that they're wrong in doing that, but it's a very formal dress Shakespeare play matter. Some Shakespeare plays, okay, they'll have civilian just normal clothes, and they'll be acting out the Shakespearean drama, in modern day contexts as far as aesthetics are concerned. But in a full-on, full-dress Shakespeare play, okay, they are dressing very much in accordance with the times of the play was set. So King Henry the Fourth is dressed like a king, and he's in full dress. And there's a sect of people that gravitate towards full-dress Shakespeare plays, and there are some people that say, okay, Shakespeare is Shakespeare. I don't care if the person is wearing, Adidas.
yeah,
What matters to me is the content is delivered to me. So, what is the stance on aesthetics in the Quaker faith, or is there any?
and
I mean,
hard question to answer because there is a broad range of Quakers.
sure.
But it really goes back to that simplicity. We want to, just like in our lives, we want to be free to do the ministry that God sets before us as a church meeting.
Sure.
We also want to be as simple as we can be so that we're free to do what God calls us to do.
Right.
So most friends meetings will not have elaborate decorations because we prefer to use the funds and that we have available to us for other sorts of ministries.
Right.
So that's really how we look at it. Our meeting house here, if I know people that have driven by it every single day for years, and when I tell them, yeah, our meeting is on this corner, they're like, I thought that was a house. And yeah, it looks like a house.
Right.
And I'm totally okay with that because it should be something that's welcoming, comforting, and that sort of thing, comfortable. But we also are here for a specific reason.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
we obviously have pews in our meeting house because it's here for a function as well.
Right.
So, and we do have some artwork in our meeting house. Hopefully it's done in a way that it encourages us into that worship with God that we believe is necessary. So,
Okay.
but it's not, there is a place for aesthetics, but sometimes we can get too far.
Okay. So what would the place be?
The place is, in my belief, is it's a door to allow you to open in and feel that comfort, that welcoming into this place, and just kind of leading you into something deeper.
Okay.
So if a building isn't welcoming in that way, then it can you become guarded.
Sure.
So you're not able to open your heart to what you hope to experience in that holy expectancy that we promote here in the Friends Church. So if it closes you down, that's a problem. So we want to have just enough aesthetics to make you feel comfortable.
Okay. So disarming.
yeah, just to allow you to be comfortable.
Right.
There's really not a better way to explain that,
No,
because
it's good.
it's supposed to feel like home. So
Sure, yeah, feel like home.
And if you aren't comfortable at home, then you would probably move. So
Sure.
we want to be comfortable, but we don't want to go beyond what is necessary as well. So
Right.
and we just want enough.
Sure.
So
The author named Samuel Beckett wrote the play Waiting for Godot. It's considered the greatest play in the English language by most critics. The entire set is a tree, and the rest of the stage is blank. This is called minimalism.
yeah.
So, would you say there's something like that you want to be minimalistic in how you present yourselves?
I would say
Yeah.
minimalism, some people would say that. I just basically say simplistic, because we do have more than some, but we also don't have as much decoration as others. So,
Okay.
I mean, if you wanted to zoom the camera around, you could see that what you can see in this frame right now is about all that we have.
Right.
We have a couple of fake trees and a portrait of Jesus praying. That's about the extent of our decoration in our meeting house.
Sure.
So,
And that's by intent, because when someone comes in here, you want the focus to be on the content.
right, and we have a portrait of Jesus praying in Gethsemane, because that's kind of what we focus on. Jesus is with us, is our idea. So that portrait should direct us into that with Christ aspect of what we and the Evangelical Friends Church believe.
So this building burns down for some reason whatsoever. You would meet at a home, or you could meet at a Denny's, or you could meet anywhere.
We can meet anywhere.
And,
so,
right, and the meeting would stay the same. As far as
Right.
core tenet, it's passion, it's participation. It wouldn't change, because material surroundings don't matter. It's the meeting.
Yeah, we could meet in our yard just as easy as we could here.
Right.
We could meet in a living room, because everything that we do in this space, you can do anywhere. So we don't have a special piece of furniture that is necessary for a certain aspect of our worship.
Yeah.
Because everything is already here for you.
Now, the Quaker, first off, who are you as a Quaker? And explain the organizational aspects with respect to where you're at now in the Midwest, where we are at now in the Midwest, and how things might differ in this Quaker sect versus how it's practiced on the East Coast, or just like that.
I am what is called a recorded minister in the yearly meeting.
Right.
A yearly meeting, for most people, it would be similar to a conference or a denominational headquarters or something like that. We call it a yearly meeting because we meet once a year for common business. So I'm a recorded minister, meaning that the people in the yearly meeting have observed my activities and have recorded that they believe that I have a calling to be a minister. Similar to ordination, but our belief is that God ordains and will ordain, and we as humans record what God has already done. So
when you say recorded minister, who is the recording echelon? Who's doing? I understand record. It doesn't mean like literally recording, but it means like taken note of. It means acknowledge. Who's doing the acknowledging?
To become a recorded minister, first your local meeting, what we call your monthly meeting, what most other people would call your local church, has to recognize that gift.
Right.
And they recommend to our area meeting that we would like to proceed with recording. And then the area will then recommend that to the yearly meeting. And the yearly meeting has a board of elders that looks at the candidates for recording, or that have been offered up for recording.
Okay.
And if they question, they can ask questions, and the recording and people that are in that recording process will answer questions if they need to, and eventually the elders will recommend it back to the yearly meeting, which is representatives of all the meetings or churches within that meet in that yearly meeting.
Right.
Our particular one has about 66 churches that meet together for this annual meeting.
And that's in Wichita?
And it's located in Wichita.
Okay.
Sometimes we meet in Haviland at college that we have there, but usually it's in Wichita. That's the central office.
Okay.
But then they recommend it to the yearly meeting session, and the people at that yearly meeting session will say, yes, we recognize you, and we record that you are a minister or a pastor or whatever type of ministry you're recording in.
Sure.
So,
in order to do that, I know you yourself are a graduate of Friends University. You hold a master's degree, and correct me on what your degree is in. I'm sorry.
I have a master's in Christian ministry.
Christian ministry. Okay.
It's not a seminary degree.
Okay.
I'm not fluent in Greek or Hebrew, so
Sure.
I focused on Christian studies is basically what it is, because there's certain things that I was more interested in, like spiritual formation, not necessarily the languages. So that's what I focused in. So it's a Christian service is the actual sub-degree within the Christian ministry degree.
Yeah.
So
So certain physicists would say they would prefer physics that apply to reality, that are more practical. Like physics in everyday life is a college course. It's physics and how it's physics come about in your daily life and how you can affect them and use them. But there's also theoretical physics that refers more to like quantum level particles and different abstract notions. Would you say that your degree is something like physics in everyday life? Like you want to latch on to those things about ministry that can be practiced, that are practical, and that can be used readily, and that are available, that can be used for people, opposed to focusing on theological notions, or focusing on the metaphysical and being able to abstract a lot, but not very much apply that to getting people on the path to heaven.
Yeah, my degree, why I went to France University was because in France we don't require a seminary degree.
Okay.
If God calls you to be a minister, God's going to equip you to be the minister that He calls you to be.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, when I started in ministry as a pastor, I had a degree in crop science. Totally the exact opposite of pastoral ministry, because I was working with plants, not people.
Sure, right.
So, but I was accepted as a minister.
Sure.
Because I had a calling, and people recognized that calling, so they asked me to stay and minister with them. But while I was in that position, I realized that I don't know anything about counseling. I don't know anything on how to encourage people to deepen their prayer life. Or, sometimes I don't really know how to study the Bible. So I have to admit that to myself. So I did go and get a higher education because I felt it was necessary to do what God called me to do.
Sure.
So, and that's why I went and got it. So it was a very practical degree.
Right.
Because it was giving me the tools that I needed to continue the ministry that God called me on.
Okay.
And I went to France because it's a good school, and it's close.
Yeah.
And it was close to me then.
Right.
So.
Right. What was the impetus of becoming a Quaker? Like what led you to become a Quaker? What attracted you to the faith? as a man?
I was what some people would call a birthright friend. Um, we don't use that term as much in the evangelical friends groups because we're more evangelical. So, but birthright means I was born into a family that was Quakers. But the thing with this is I had to choose to stay. So my belief is that we're all convinced. Every person is a convinced friend, no matter if they were born into it or whether they grew or whether they came from a different brand of faith. So why I stayed is because I enjoy the simplicity. I enjoy the fact that I can't put on a play and make you think that I'm super righteous without living it out.
Right.
I have what I say I have to do, or people don't believe me. So if I say that I don't, if I say that I spend hours in prayer, people are gonna watch and see if I actually do.
Right.
And I do. So, and that's important to me because I want what I say to be trustworthy.
Absolutely.
And that's really why I stayed in a friend.
Okay.
And a lot of the other things I just found that churches didn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
They were just good symbols to encourage us deeper into faith, but if the reality wasn't there, they were pointless.
Sure.
And I knew many people that would just go through the motions, and it bothered me. So I was convinced in my own journey that I want to stay a friend because I like the simplicity, I like the integrity of it, I like just the simple fact that I can worship wherever I'm at. I don't need anything other than a group of people to encourage and to be encouraged by.
Sure.
So,
You have a very good explanation of that you've spoken on before about millennials and why they're leaving the church in such great numbers.
mm-hmm.
That's not been being reported by me, but by other people, institutions,
Mm-hmm.
keeping track of such things, that millennials are leaving the church because of reason that you've spoken of, is that they don't see the congregation practicing what is being preached, or they don't see, like you were saying, they don't see it being lived out. Now, Carl Jung talked about how our stories became, our legends and myths are real, not in the sense that there are actually dragons, they're actually gnomes or mermaids, or whatever, but they became real because they have a psychological significance, because human beings at some point acted them out, and by acting them out, there hence became something called drama, and the drama is real in the sense that it was acted out. The core psychological premises were acted out for so many thousands of years that it became real. So, would you say that that it's similar in the Quaker ideology, that the acting out the faith makes it real, and then to claim to be a tenet of the Quaker faith and not act it out makes it fiction? Kind of expound on that.
Okay. What I see is the main reason why millennials are leaving the church.
Right.
I don't necessarily like that terminology. I think the real thing that's going on is those that don't believe are leaving the church. And the reason is, why live a lie?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't believe it, why stay in a place where I have to act like I believe what's going on? And in previous generations, we continued to play act. And we continued to say, well, yeah, I believe, so I'm a Christian because that's what my parents were.
Sure.
But it wasn't what I actually believed. So millennials are saying, this isn't real. You're not living it out. You don't really believe what you say you believe, and we're not going to put up with the inauthentic. And they just take a step out.
Okay.
Does that mean that people in the younger generations are anti-religion or anti-faith, anti-spirituality? Absolutely not. There's more people that are searching for some meaning in their life now than in previous generations.
Right. Would you say that it's not real to them unless they see it acted out?
Yes, it's what is the most important thing for a lot of the younger generation is that it has meaning to you.
Right.
And that it's real to you.
Right.
And that you are living what you say you believe.
Right.
So there's no play acting.
Sure.
It is life.
Right.
And life to me is, I think my personal feeling is we as friends that's what we do. That's what we've been for, the centuries that we've been in existence, is we don't try to play act. If we don't believe it, we don't believe it. If we do, we live it out.
Right.
And that's what attracts me to the Friends Church.
Sure.
Is because I like when people come together and they seek to find an answer together, and then they fully engage in that. It doesn't matter who you are, what age you are, or anything. Everybody has a voice, and we all work together. I may be a pastor, but that doesn't make me in charge. I'm just one minister among many.
Which leads into the next question, that the Quaker faith seems to be more egalitarian and much less hierarchical,
Mm-hmm.
and much less patriarchal than most Wesleyan denominations.
Yeah.
So explain to me how it is more, maybe egalitarian is the wrong word. Maybe you could pick a word that would better describe.
Well, there's one of the core beliefs of Friends is that we believe that all people are equal.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily meaning that we all deserve equal incomes or anything like that, but we are all loved by God,
Mm-hmm.
and are all able to be called by God. So we don't have a hierarchy because everybody is equal.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm called to do a certain type of ministry, I'll do that because God has called me to that ministry. Does that make me better than somebody that isn't called to that ministry? No. God may call them to a ministry of, fixing somebody's cars. I may be a pastor, they may be a mechanic, but we're still equal. So that's the main thing about that I find is very encouraging for me personally, is I don't have to have all the answers as a pastor.
Right.
We're all in this together.
Sure.
It's a relationship, and what you have to say may be more important than what I have to say.
Right.
And sometimes it is.
Right.
So, but we've always had men and women both equal in ministry, and my great-great-grandmother was a minister during World War I because there wasn't anyone else to be the minister in that church. So, and we just believe that God's going to use whoever's willing to do that job. So
there's no codified way of convincing someone to be a Quaker. There's no set way. There's no manual. There's no church manual. There's no 99 thesis. There's no way Quakers have of convincing someone to be brought into this faith. Nor do you feel inclined to have something like that. Nor do you feel inclined to bring people into the faith at all, unless they feel compelled to penetrate your circle and to come into adherence with what you believe and live it out in front of you.
mm-hmm.
And then once they've done that, who approaches who? How does one get into this? How does one do this? How does one become a Quaker?
really, to begin with, there's two names that most people associate with the church that we're talking about. There's Quakers, which was actually started out to be a detriment, making fun of the early Friends. The other is the Friends Church, or the Religious Society of Friends. So I use those terms interchangeably, but Friends don't necessarily go out to try to evangelize the world. Yes, we do that to some extent, but we're not there to make converts. We're there to convince and to encourage. So the term friends is the perfect name for us because that's what we do. Mm-hmm. If you're going to become somebody's friend, you don't hit them over the head with a baseball bat. You become their friend. You talk to them, you encourage them, you listen to them, you talk with them, and there's an equal exchange of ideas. And that's what we try to do as a religious society, is to walk with each other mm-hmm. in faith. Mm-hmm. So that's really our goal, is to walk with people in faith. So if you approach me and ask me what does it take to become a Quaker or a friend, I'll take you for a walk. We'll just start talking. We'll start encouraging. Right. And you can do it in many different ways. It depends on who's involved in that conversation.
Well, it's something like a paradoxical, like the Buddha said. If you want to become enlightened, or if you think you're enlightened, then you're not enlightened. You're not enlightened at all. Mm-hmm. Then you're the opposite. You're blind. But if you think that you are not enlightened, then you've already found enlightenment to begin with, and you need not look anymore. So is it a situation where if you want to become a Quaker, then you're not and probably won't be. But if you don't want to become a Quaker, but you're around Quakers, and it sort of happens like in osmosis, mm-hmm. Then that's how it would occur. It wouldn't be a scripted traditional kind of approach to saying, okay, this is what I want. These are the people that have it. I will go and ask them for it. I will do A, B, C, and D, mm-hmm. and thereafter I shall be a Quaker. Is it something more complex than that? Is it more dense? Is it more hard to get there?
I'd say it's very complex. and yeah, you don't just set out to become a Quaker. It's something that grows. If you want to know what Friends believe, you have to go to that meeting, and you have to observe it. Mm-hmm. You have to participate in it, mm-hmm. and you just have to walk that journey, mm-hmm. Because it's a relational religion, or a relational faith. Mm-hmm. You don't just read a book and say, yes, I believe that, close it and go on.
Sure.
Because now you have to live it out. So if I say that I believe that everyone's called to be a minister in some degree, do I allow space for them to do that?
Right.
If I believe that my yes should be yes and my no is no, and refuse to swear because that's what Scripture encourages, do I live that out?
Sure.
Or do I just swear anyway? So so yeah, it's very complex because relationships are complex. Mm-hmm. And one person may grab a hold of it and run because it's like love at first sight or something. Mm-hmm. And other people, it may take 30 years to get to the point where they can say, yeah, this is who I am. For me, I was an adult before I actually really said, even though I grew up in the Friends Church, when I really said, this is who I am. And at that point in time, that's when I became a pastor. So yeah, it's for some it's right away. For others, it can take years.
Okay.
So
there are a lot of important Quakers in the history of the United States that that are probably known, or what they have done is known about, but the fact that they were Quakers isn't known about. So could you quickly name some key figures in our history that have played a pivotal role in the formation of the American nation that were Quakers, or even groups of Quakers that had played an instrumental role in the foundation of America that are known but not known as Quakers?
well, the right off the bat is of course William Penn, who was instrumental in the colony of Pennsylvania. Penn was a convinced friend, and he came to the colonies for the Holy Experiment.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the ideas that he tried to convince people of are what became the foundation of what the United States is.
Mm.
So we think of the founding fathers and all of that. That really began, in my opinion, with William Penn, because he is the first one that wanted united colonies to join together and talk so that we can approach the king as a united front instead of as 13 individual colonies. So yeah, I think William Penn and the colony of Pennsylvania was instrumental in the history of America. And a lot of it also deals with, you don't have to have a specific place for Quaker worship. So in a lot of the frontier lands, if a Friends Church was there, a lot of people became Quakers because they were there. And we didn't tell them, no, you have to do certain things before you can become part of our group. You were just there and you participated, and we encourage you from where you were at all the way to where you get to where you want to be. So other key figures in Quaker history in America, there's Levi Coffin, who was instrumental in the Underground Railroad. So and the abolitionist movement. So that's something that we've been a part of for from really the very beginning. And then John Woolman was also an abolitionist. And then there's people for women's suffrage as well. So there's just a lot of key friends that have parts of in American history. We look at what they did. We don't necessarily look at their religion as much. So,
sure. Yeah. So Quakers have taken, I don't want to call it a backseat role, but there is a Quaker influence or a Quaker presence in virtually every social movement and every social reform movement, whether it be abolitionism, whether it be women's suffrage, whether it be
the civil rights movement.
Civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, and even up until today, some of the social movements today,
Yeah, there's Quaker influence in the Wall Street thing.
Occupy Wall Street.
Occupy Wall Street.
Okay.
There's Quaker influence in there. There's also Quaker influence in the Tea Party movement.
Okay.
There's also Quaker influence in the environmental movements. Okay. So there's ideas, because Quakers aren't necessarily on the theological aspect of everything. We look at, how does this affect humanity in our journey in faith?
Mm-hmm.
So if there's an injustice that we see, whether that be slavery, whether that be women aren't having the right to vote or something like that, we see the issue and we encourage change, because we believe that all people have an equal role in our society. So we want to make sure that we encourage the places that we live to have that in their society.
So in terms of Quaker influence in social movements, What about Quaker influence in movements that would seem to promote um, a idea of collectivism? What about, for instance, hashtag Me Too? For instance, what happened in Missouri with Black Lives Matter? Things that may seem to promote, in the minds of some, a collectivist mentality that's ultimately bad for the country and our social well-being. Or do Quakers have a stance on that? I mean,
that's a deep question because it deals with society as a whole. Society's complex, so, but most friends focus on how can I encourage those that are in there.
right.
So, it's we have different roles in society, so we just want to encourage individuals to do what they think is right in their lives, and that's the extent that I really think is necessary. Is, am I offering a place for you to express what you need to express?
Sure. Absolutely.
And is this encouraging others? It's not necessarily do we need to have a collective mentality, it's are we recognizing that there is something that should be said?
Sure, absolutely.
And are we standing for truth, or are we standing for something that is a lie?
What do you think about social justice?
Social justice is a fun little cliche word. So I think we stand for justice, and that's the most important thing. If I say something, if integrity is important to me, then we need to do that. We need to live our lives in such a way that people can trust what we say and what we do. So yes, justice is incredibly important. Social justice, though, it can be taken the wrong way. I think that as Jesus is trying to tell us that there's more to the story, that we all have a role to play, and we need to focus on how to alleviate the problems without causing more problems. So, and that's why I don't necessarily like the term social justice, even though I use it in sermons occasionally, mainly because it's a hot topic word that kind of sticks us.
It's a loaded word.
It's a loaded word, yes, it's a loaded phrase, but there's more to the story. So if we have people that are being injured in some way, either in our nation or in another nation, and we don't point out the fact that this is happening, we're part of the problem.
Right.
But if we're there trying to encourage change in a positive way, that's what we should be doing.
Right. I think the current hot topic, pressing social issues, would make for a great piece on its own, and I think that you have a great insight into that, and I think people would be love to hear more. But let's since we're on the topic of Quakerism and its roots and what it is today and how it came about, and let's try and hit some of the core kind of hard stances that the church may or may not take, and maybe we can have a talk on a separate video about Quakers, the Society of Friends, and their take on hot button social issues that may be more controversial for a video, just trying to get people into what Quakerism is, right, and get that delineated. So, briefly describe your disposition regarding the sacraments.
Friends, historically, we were formed during the Civil War of England. So there was religious people on both sides of the war saying that you had to believe a certain way, and you had to do things a certain way, and you weren't really a Christian if you didn't do it this way. So you had the Puritan ideas, you had the Anglican ideas, and they were at war with each other. And the friends came in and said, well, you're both not really living what you're saying you're living. Let's get rid of that. And what is the core of what is behind all these, the practices that you're saying, and let's just do what's true. And I call it distilled Christianity because when you distill something, you get it down to that purest form of what we truly believe. Distilled water is water. There's no minerals in there or anything like that. It's just water. And that's what I think Quakers were trying to do, is getting to that essence of what is pure, without any additives, without anything added to it, just pure faith.
Right.
And that's what I believe we came up with, is we meet in silence. Yes, in the Evangelical France Church we sing and we have a prepared message, but our sacrament, everything builds up to is that time where we center down and are quiet with one another, and we are just listening. It can be explained as open worship, holy expectancy. It's that time where you're allowing the divine to speak to you. And so we don't have a lot of the rituals. People ask, well, are you baptized? I'm baptized in the manner of France, meaning I'm saturated with the Spirit. It's either Christ is in me or Christ isn't in me. Being dunked in a tank of water doesn't change the fact that I have faith. And some people will disagree with me, and that's fine. And they've been arguing about baptism for 2,000 years now. So what the right way is, it's not going to change anything. But what is the meaning behind the baptism of a believer? Is at one point I was something else, and now I've died to that, and I've been raised into a different type of lifestyle. I can have that with or without the sacrament. So
with or without the symbolic act of the sacrament.
Of the act of the sacrament,
right.
Yes.
Which ties into what you were saying, is that living out and acting it out. So
yes.
People get caught up in, so they want to say Wesleyan holiness. Myself, I'll speak from the Nazarene vantage point, that if you don't literally take the communion, and you don't subscribe to transubstantiation, that the bread is the body of Christ, then in there literally, and the wine or whatever the grape juice or whatever the congregation might use, is then there becomes the blood of Christ, and you consume the article of bread and you consume the sup of wine or grape juice. To them, that is bound up. The literal act of taking those is too bound up in the act itself, and but not acted out. So the Quaker disposition is that instead of doing these things in the symbolic manner of action, in the literal manner of actually doing them, we are instead going to acknowledge their importance, and we're going to acknowledge their necessity, but we're not going to use them as a gimmick, or as a tool, or as a thing that we do in the moment. It's going to be a lifelong process.
Right. Our belief is that life is sacrament. Everything about our life should be directing us to that relationship with God. However we want to define that, it should be directing us to that thing, that way of life that we desire to live. So every meal that we eat is an act of sacrament. Every time we do anything should be encouraging us to deepen that life of faith. So, we having a ceremony and a worship service is a wonderful symbolic realization that we can hold on to.
Sure.
But it's not the reality.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is Christ is there.
Mm-hmm.
In my belief that Christ is always around us.
Right.
And he wants to have that relationship with us. That he's providing everything that we have and everything that we need. And all we need to do is believe and meet him where we're at.
Who is God, Pastor Warner?
God is God. I mean, so I come from an evangelical Friends background, and I believe that there is a God. And, there are some Quaker groups that may believe differently, but I do believe that there is a God.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that God is the creator of heaven and earth. I believe that there is a heaven. I believe that there is earth.
Mm-hmm.
And God is participating with his creation and wants to be a part of it. That God wants us to have a relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
If we read scripture in the Garden of Eden, God walked with Adam and Eve in the garden before they fell.
Right.
God still wants to walk with us in the garden. So that's what I believe.
Sure.
I believe that there is a God. I believe that there is earth going around in space and things change, yes, but God is still with us.
Right. But what is God? Who is he?
God is the creator in my understanding of who God is. He's the creator. He's the one where life began. He's the truth. He's the word. He is where knowledge and wisdom comes from.
Is he the unmoved mover? Or is he the moved that was moved?
Can get into circular understanding on that. So it is, I believe that God started everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that God keeps everything in some sort of order.
Sure.
He keeps it in a range, so to speak.
Sure. So God is something more like order and stability and reliability and righteousness and truth of word and deed and action.
Right.
And
God is.
His opposite is something more like what the Bible refers to as Lucifer, as Satan, as whoever. Something more like chaos. Something more like instability. Yeah. Something more like not true to his word. Something more like can't be relied upon. Something that will trick you, that will deceive you, that will make you go down a path that's ultimately bad for you and bad for society, and will therefore result in the instantiation of what the Bible calls hell. And that is to say that that you are in a place where you have no control, where your life is in shambles, where you are in pain, you are in suffering, and you're separated from God. So it is safe to say that if we were to relegate God to a word, it would be order. And if we were to relegate Satan to a word, it would be chaos.
You could do that, yes.
Okay.
So I would also say wisdom and lies or untruth, truth and untruth, or you could signify it in one word, but it isn't complete because God is beyond our human understanding.
Right.
So it's a difficult question to ask, and we grow in our answer to that.
Right. What has solidified your faith in God? What has happened to you in your personal life that has built that certainty about God within your life?
There's a lot of things in my life that has pointed me in that direction. I grew up in a family that had faith, and they taught that to me. So some people would say that I'd only believe because that's the way I was raised. Mm-hmm. That isn't necessarily true because I didn't want to believe.
Right.
And there were instances where, I had a car accident when I was in high school where I rolled a Blazer 3 times. I left the house without a seatbelt on. and I went to fill up my tank with gas because we lived out in the middle of nowhere. We had a tank of gas at my grandparents' house that we could fill up our cars. Filled it up, and I started off again, and something told me you just have to put on your seatbelt. So I did. Not a mile down the road, I was in an accident. So, to me, that was God telling me. Somebody else would say it's just a coincidence or whatever.
Would you call it a voice, or would you call it a feeling, or would you call it a conviction, or would you call it a presence?
I would just, to me, it was a voice. It wasn't an audible voice, but it was you need to do this. And it was as real to me as as if my parents were having a conversation with me from the back seat. It's hard to explain. Anyway, I put on my seatbelt and I lived through the accident, so it saved my life. Other times, my little sister passed away when she was 10, and I was a freshman in college. And a lot of people would say that would be incredibly difficult, and it was. And I prayed the night before she passed away. I'm like, if she's going to die, let me accept that and move on to be strong for my family. And I felt the assurance that yes, that's what it's going to be, and it's okay, because she's going to be with God. And did I still mourn? Absolutely. Every single day I still mourn, but I've had that assurance that yes, this is what is going to happen, and it's going to be okay. And her death changed a lot in my life. I didn't always handle it well, but it did change. And what really solidified my belief is when I had my first son. And when I looked at his face for the first time, I understood what love was. And I understood what God meant in Scripture when he looked at Israel as his children. And even though they may not have done everything that he wanted them to do, he loved them. Because I loved my son, and he hadn't done a single thing yet but breathe. So that's really when I became what I would call a Christian, is when my son was born. So
is it something like what would happen when God caused his son to come about? Is that how God derived his love for humanity? Do you think the Father and the Son, is it a coincidence, or is it something more?
I think it's more intentional. So what looks like coincidence to us, if you look at it from a wider scope, it's not necessarily coincidence anymore. So I can honestly say that the reason my son was born was my dealing with my grief of my sister. So at that point I understood a lot more. So I can't say that it's all coincidence, but I do think that God understands what it takes for us to believe.
Right.
And he's going to provide what we need for that belief if we're open to listening.
Right. To wrap up, do Quakers have any straight hard stances, any dietary restrictions, holy days, political stances or foundational beliefs that are absolutely non-negotiable?
Not really. So we have a lot of things that a lot of people say that SPICE is a good acronym for what we believe. Simplicity is the S, peace is the P, integrity, community, and equality. And that's probably the closest thing that I can say is a fundamental belief. But is there a holy day? Not necessarily. We don't celebrate George Fox's birthday or anything like that. some friends, especially in the evangelical friends, we do celebrate Christmas and Easter because we are Christian. We don't have dietary restrictions. We don't necessarily participate in fasts of Lent or anything like that, but we encourage people to maybe consider that if it would help their faith. And as far as politics, we're across the board on that. We do have certain things that we do focus on. We have a peace testimony, and that kind of puts us at odds with both political parties, because our testimony for peace is that war is never good. Yes, at times it's necessary, but war is never good. There's always a cost, and we should promote peace instead of war because the cost is always high. Whether it's loss of life in the area that the war's being perpetrated in, or if it's just the emotional cost of those that go into war. We should be mindful of those.
Are most Quakers conscientious objectors?
A lot of Quakers are. I'd say majority of them are conscientious objectors, because it's not necessarily a good thing to promote war. In my belief, we should promote something other than war, and we shouldn't force anybody to participate in something that they don't think is that they can't support religiously or in their own faith or anything like that. I personally am a conscientious objector. My son, through many conversations, he enlisted into the military. It's up to that individual, but during those conversations, we believe the same thing. We just act those out in a different way. So he also believes that war has a great cost and we should avoid it at all costs. He found that it was more important to try to do that on the inside than on the outside. So
that makes a lot of sense.
But it's up to the individual. We don't, in the Evangelical Friends Church, we do not excommunicate people that have served in military, but we also want to recognize that there is a strong peace testimony within the Evangelical Friends. Sure. We don't like war, and nobody should. So, absolutely. So that's probably the one political stance that most of the Friends churches would agree on. You know, peace is important.
Anti-war, but not anti-veteran. Or
no, we are very in our meeting here. We support veterans. We encourage them. We want to let them know that we love them just as much as we love anybody else. And they were put in a position where they didn't really have much choice in what was going on. So we want to let them know that there is healing available. So we will encourage whoever comes to our doors, and veterans are some of them.
You have 10 seconds
okay.
to summarize what a Quaker is and what they believe. Go.
Man, 10 seconds. Okay. Friends believe in truth, that Jesus will teach us. He is our ever-present teacher and guide. And if we slow down and listen to him, we can know the truth and live it out.
Very good. Any final remarks?
Not really. I think for me personally, this is who I am. And if you're searching, find people that are authentic and that are willing to talk to you and are willing to live their life in front of you and test it out. Go and see what they do. Don't just take their word for it. See what they do and live life. That's what it's all about.
Tell us about how to get in touch with you and the Willow Creek Friends Church here on State Line Road.
It's
Tell us what your service times are. How does one become a participant in your church?
this meeting is Willow Creek Friends Church. We're on 9700 Warnell Road in Kansas City, Missouri. Our service times, our meeting for worship is at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings, or first day mornings if you're more of a plain speech Quaker. It is what we call a program service or semi-program service. So there is singing, there is a prepared message that I give or somebody else if I'm not here. And then there is open worship where we will meet in silence as well. And that's 11 o'clock is when we start that. There is Bible study prior to that at 10 a.m. if you would like to join us for that. You can also read any messages that I give on my blog at jwquaker.com and on this YouTube channel. So, and if you have any questions, leave a comment. So I answer them, and I will answer pretty much any question that you ask.
Well, as a interviewer, I feel very enlightened from your comments, and I think the viewers will too. So thanks, Pastor Warner, for a job well done.
Thank you.